going live now, just one moment.
Give me the nod. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the final Future Nillumbik Committee meeting for Nillumbik Shire Council. Members of the public are advised the meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the live stream and video recording will be made publicly available on YouTube and Council's website. Nillumbik Shire Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land upon where we are meeting tonight. We would also like to pay our respects to elders both past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians present. We have no apologies. Could I have a mover for the confirmation of minutes of the FNC held on Tuesday, the 8th of September 2020, please? Councillor Perkins, second Councillor Clark. All those in favour? And that is carried. Thank you, councillors. Any disclosures of interest that I should be aware of? If not, councillors, will move into our first item, which is FNO 32-20, 3-lot subdivision and removal of native vegetation at 26 Warringah Crescent, Eltham. And we have 5 speakers tonight. Our first speaker is Wendy Morris, and our CEO, Carl Cowie, is going to read the submission. Thank you, Carl.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors and members of the gallery. Wendy writes, Chair, members of the Nillumbik Shire Council, officers and fellow residents of Nillumbik. I am one of several residents in Warringah Crescent who has registered an objection to the granting of a permit to allow the subdivision of the property at 26 Warringah Crescent, Eltham, into 3 lots. The east-west section of Warringah Crescent is a very special area. It is part of one of the few residential areas in Eltham which was never cleared for farmland. It retains significant areas of remnant Indigenous vegetation and is adjacent to reserves and the bushland areas along Karingal Yallock. The particular block is covered by significant landscape, environmental significance and neighbourhood character semi-bush overlays. As mentioned in the Practical Ecology Report, section 3.3.2 Fauna, the vegetation on this block offers very good fauna habitat and is in part of vital wildlife corridor connecting the Karingal Yallock and the Diamond Creek corridors. The environmental assessments conducted in support of the application do not adequately portray the special nature of this area in relation to the flora and fauna. I am sure statements from my neighbours would provide much more substantial evidence of this failure than I can. However, just as an example, I have personally recorded the presence of 18 different species of birds in my garden over the years. Further, the change in the bird population after Black Saturday clearly demonstrated that the area also acts as a haven for wildlife from fire-affected areas. This application involves the destruction of more than 20 trees and will have a civil of those who has been continuing to weed and collect rubbish in the Nerriman Reserve adjacent to this area during the lockdown period. We value the opportunity we have through the Friends Group to help conserve and restore Indigenous vegetation and encourage the presence of Indigenous wildlife. However, we are also acutely aware how much the effectiveness of our group's efforts relies on the existence of the similar vegetation beyond the reserve area to provide sufficient habitat to support the existence of many species of wildlife. The proposed development would significantly erode these conditions. Unfortunately, the vegetation and wildlife are not my only concerns. The final document presented in support of it.
Thank you, Carl.
That one's not completely finished, but you get the general idea. The next,
Emily Donaldson.
Emily Donaldson. My objection is for reasons of death by 1,000 cuts for Eltham semi-bush precinct and the specifics of this proposal. The semi-bush precinct where I live and out of which Karingal Crescent is part has an added level of beauty even for Eltham, with its continuous bush feel and large leafy blocks. Protection is legislated and supported by planning scheme overlays. However, my experience has been that despite this, protection is not guaranteed. The Warringah Crescent proposal does not respond sensitively to bush character, existing tree locations or contours. The size and siting of building envelopes will result in many houses closer together and cause more tree removal than necessary, including significant canopy trees without the space for replacement. In the absence of development plans, the proposal likely underrepresents the full extent of future canopy loss. This is compounded by there being 2 subdivisions proposed. The plan for 2 extra driveways will cause a large treeless section of street frontage, the removal of 2 medium retention value trees, and encroachment on the tree protection zones of 4 trees greatly in excess of the 10 to 15% limit. Lot access is steep and driveways, houses and services will likely require significant earthworks, causing more disturbance and potential tree loss. Additional specifics of my objection have already been received by Council. For these same reasons of lot access, impact or removal of significant canopy trees, building envelope siting, and neighbourhood character concerns in a bush precinct, VCAT in June did not issue a permit for subdivision of 107 Ryans Road, Eltham North. It is vital that these dwindling areas of high natural values, aka the lungs of Melbourne, are protected and enhanced. This is a unique part of our city and all residents are custodians. We cannot rely on obliging neighbours to provide future character and tree canopy when there is a permissive atmosphere towards subdivision and development-related tree loss. Approving this subdivision will set the precedent for blocks of this size and natural value and may lead to other similar subdivisions proposals in the vicinity. It doesn't mean development should not occur, but there must be a clear message as to what is appropriate and what is not. I call on Council to use the protective overlays and neighbourhood character design guidelines to limit or reject this proposal. I am concerned that in future more, not less protection will be needed and believe that Council should increase the minimum block size for the semi-bush precinct to further protect values. Council should also require that proposals. This one's
Sorry, I know you're nearly finished.
Okay, that's okay.
And next we have Evan Webster from the Webster Survey Group.
We thank the Shire of Nillumbik for giving the opportunity to provide comments at this meeting. We also thank the objectors for their input. Together with our client, we have reviewed the comments provided by the adjoining landowners and offer the following adjustments to the proposal. 1. Modify the access for Lot 2 so that it can utilise the existing crossover. This will mean no crossovers will be required in Warringah Crescent as Lot 3 already has a formed crossover. This also protects the street tree identified as Tree 1 on the arborist report. This adjustment will allow the streetscape to remain unchanged as the 2 existing crossovers will be used for access. Eye view from Warringah Crescent will be tree canopy and building rooftops that are situated within the Nillumbik estate to the south of the site. Any proposed buildings on lots 2 and 3 will be at the lower level and mostly obscured by the existing residents. It is proposed to increase the setback of the building envelope for Lot 2 along the southern boundary from 6 metres to 10 metres to ensure light to upper level windows at 4 Coolabindi Chase are not affected during winter months. It is noted that there is high screening adjacent to ground floor windows. This increased setback will also benefit the wildlife corridor through the site. 3. It is proposed to double the setback of the building envelope for Lot 3 along the eastern boundary from 3 metres to 6 metres to provide an area suitable for creating a landscape buffer with the adjoining residence at 30 Warringah Crescent. Discussions have taken place with the owner of 24 Warringah Crescent regarding fencing. We believe the proposed subdivision at 26 Warringah Crescent will achieve a desirable outcome. It will have very limited impact on the surrounding area and will provide 2 new lots, which are in excess of 1,300 square meters in area and 1,100 square meters exclusive of access shaft. And that is Evan's submission.
Shy Maiden is next.
Shy Maiden writes, the proposed subdivision is situated directly to our north and up on the slope, on the upslope. We are very concerned that the proposed subdivision and subsequent development being on our northern boundary and upslope from our block will adversely affect our residential amenity with the lessening of natural light entering our property. We also feel the impact to wildlife and bird life would be too great due to the higher density of the subdivision, which goes against everything that is so appealing about living in Nillumbik and all that the Green Wedge is meant to protect. The southern edge of Lot 2 building envelope comes to within 6 meters of our northern boundary. The combination of the winter sun being naturally low in the sky to our north and the subdivision being on higher ground would result in significantly less light being able to enter our property after a new dwelling was constructed, as it would effectively shield light from our north side windows and living areas both inside and out. We feel that instead of a 3-lot subdivision, a 2-lot subdivision with a building envelope situated at the eastern end would be far more appropriate, as there would be less impact to neighbouring dwellings and the current high density look of this proposal, application 153/2020-14P, would be somewhat mitigated. This would also enable more space to remain, meaning the habitat of local wildlife and bird life would be impacted less and also have less detrimental effect on the amenity of our block, and that is Shy's submission.
And we had a late submission from Julie Fink.
Julie writes, councillors, streetscapes are dependent on the sum of their parts. My question to council tonight is, does the contribution that this part of Warringah Crescent, with its largely undisturbed native vegetation and being part of a wildlife corridor, have any relevance anymore to the Nillumbik Shire? In the last 2 months, if council approves this subdivision, 2 approximately 1 acre lots on a dirt road opposite each other will become a total of 6 house lots. In a permit application at number 23 was to lose over 40 trees with the building envelopes suggested. So council in its wisdom removed the envelopes, suggesting protecting approximately 10 trees to be a good result for the neighbourhood and delaying the inevitable to a later date. If a permit is granted tonight with a predicted loss of 23 trees at number 26, this results in a loss of over 60 trees. That, to me, as a resident of over 45 years, is a major unacceptable change to my neighbourhood. If SLO1 and SLO2 overlays permit this, then why have these toothless tigers? I find it amazing how the planning department accepts that almost all trees indigenous to my area receive incredibly bad bills of health by arborists employed by developers and are of poor retention value. Native birds and animals have no such concerns. They are vital to them, and without wildlife, we are a poorer society. At number 26, most native vegetation is at the rear of the property, and a loss of 23 trees is unacceptable. The areas outside the building envelopes are not large enough in a bushfire-prone area to revegetate successfully, and 3-meter setbacks on boundaries too close to neighbouring properties to allow suitable buffering of bulk. Long gun barrel driveways are unsympathetic to the area. My point is that a 2-lot subdivision allows much more capacity to combine housing for humans and habitat for wildlife and maintain the character of our area. Sincerely, Julie Fink. and that is Julie's submission.
Thank you very much, Noel. I'm now going to hand it back over to councillors. Has anybody got a motion? Councillor Merrick.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to put forward the motion that the committee acting under delegation from the council issue a notice of decision.
Just one moment, Councillor Merrick. I'll get it up on the screen so people can see what we're doing at the same time.
Yep.
One moment.
To refuse to grant a permit on the land located at 26 Warringah Crescent, Eltham, for the subdivision of land into 3 lots on the following grounds. The proposed subdivision and layout and the density of lots is not consistent with the pattern of subdivision in the area and as required by clause 32.9 of the neighbourhood residential zone, Schedule 1 of the Nillumbik planning scheme. The proposed lot sizes are not in keeping with the preferred neighbourhood character of the area and the existing patterns of subdivision and development. The extent of the future built form across the lot will provide insufficient spacing for preferred neighbourhood character outcomes, whereby the buildings will subordinate the vegetative landscape as required under clause 22.12 of the neighbourhood character policy and clause 42.03 of the significant landscape overlay, Schedule 2 of the Nillumbik planning scheme. So that's the...
Do you have a seconder, Councillor Merrick? Councillor Clark. Back to you,
Councillor Clark.
Merrick.
Sorry, I'll just need to... 26 Warringah Crescent is a... the main issue I have with this is the basic tenet of where the application starts, and its strategic location. I think that this strategic location is a wildlife corridor between Maruka Park and the Plenty River Gorge. It is along the Karingal Yallock Creek, and it is remnant bush land that has been there for time immemorial. It is the home of the Vascagale, swift parrots move through there, and as one of our submitters said, that there's over 18 different fauna species, let alone the flora species in the area. They submit that it is within walking distance of the train station at Eltham. It's actually about a 15-minute drive because there is 2 creeks and two significant major roads in between there and Eltham. And much the same when you're heading towards Greensborough or heading towards St Helena. It's poorly serviced for public transport. And it is a significant part of the gateway into Eltham. When you look up to your left, it would leave a significant scar in the bushland, which is a great part of the amenity of the area. There is significant removal of vegetation over 0.3 hectares on each of the blocks, which really brings down the habitat and biodiversity of the area. It does not comply with the preferred neighbourhood character of the area, which is a semi-bush setting, and with the aim of providing conservation and biodiversity. The lot sizes are too small to maintain this preferred character and will diminish the canopy tree significantly. The development is too intense for the area. The road is not sealed above, and it will cause great level of erosion. There is no ability for off-street parking up the top because of the block is so steep. There is no verge on the road, and the addition of 3 driveways, which will be very steep, will lead to a great deal of runoff into the creek. The addition of a runoff retention basin at the bottom will also further diminish the native flora and fauna, and cause further issues along the creek. The creek has just been recently planted out by Melbourne Water, and is again, all that work will be taken out. The building envelopes on it are excessive. On a 1,300 square metre block, we've got 1,000 square metres of building, which just the visual bulk of that from Karingal Drive will be just enormous, and for the other residents of the area. So for those reasons, I hope that I am supported in calling for I've lost the word, not granting this permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Demeric. Over to you, Councillor Clark. Nothing to say? Any other councillors wish to speak? None? Councillor Brooker. I thought it was going.
I thought
where you
thought you might get away with the meeting without me speaking. I couldn't possibly have that.
I know. Thank you. Over to you. You have 3 minutes exactly.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Look, I think Councillor Demeric has summed it up very well. It seems to me that there's a lot of these things are just not quite right. And when you read the officer report, you get that word acceptable several times. It's not a preferred response. It's not a ideal response. You get this planning talk of it's an acceptable response, and that generally raises red flags to me. And I think who summed it up best was the actual council officer, the environmental planning officer, who talked about the habitat links. Are we really concerned about these? Are these things real or not really? It seems to me we really have to pay attention to these. They're going to be disrupted, and the response is, well, they're not going to be disrupted too much, so that's acceptable. There's a significant landscape overlay that says that, removal of native vegetation that's not detrimental to the natural environment is fine, provided, it's not detrimental. Well, who really judges that? What we really have decided is that, of course, it will be detrimental. It's just a question of degree. And people have talked about the flora and fauna who are using this area. The swift parrot is something I've had a lot of study of over the Yanyun Road duplication. And here we have yellow box trees, 16 or 17, which is their ideal habitat for foraging and so on, which is going to be removed. So, all these little things, I think, come up to a whole that says really, I don't think it ought to be supported. But really, you've got these significant landscape overlays that talks about detrimental effects. You've got an environmental overlay that talks about protecting, the local areas, and you've got a natural habitat corridor that I think we need to pay more than lip service to. So I think on balance, that's how the officers said it needed to be supported for that reason. On balance, I think on balance, it does not. It reduces a number of crucial things about connectivity, about the habitat and the birds and the possums whose environment will be downgraded, not probably in themselves enough to do it, but other things as well. So that was all. Thank you.
There's 17 seconds left on the clock. Well done, Councillor Booker. If no other councillors wish to speak, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of Councillor Demerrick's motion. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to our next item, FN 03320, the 2-lot subdivision at 8 Bird Street, Eltham. We have 8 submitters. And the first one we have is Carlotta Quinlan on behalf of the Eltham Community Action Group. And Carlotta's there. Can you turn on your microphone and video, please, Carlotta?
Right. Would I be able to read Nerita Kirov's first? I'm down to read hers. Would I be able to do that first instead of mine?
Who's sorry?
Nerita Kirov has requested that I read for her. Would I be able to do that one?
Yes, that's fine.
Now
Okay.
right. Can you hear me? Am I loud enough?
You are, and as usual, you have 3 minutes, and then councillors may, or we can't ask for any questions on behalf of the president, but your own we can.
I'd like to object to the planned development of 8 Bird Street, Eltham. Having lived in Bird Street for over 50 years, I have an intimate knowledge of it and used to go to the milk bar that 8 Bird Street originally was. I was friends with children of earlier owners and used to play in the backyard that also housed chooks, pigeons, and beautiful big trees that we used to climb. My first realisation that something was happening to the old milk bar was hearing chainsaws that went all day over a weekend, conveniently timed so that it was hard to follow up with council. This happened again at a later date. Both times I rang council to get advice. I didn't receive calls back, and the same thing happened in the second time when the rest of the trees were cut down. My point is that all the trees were removed. The site looks like a nuclear wasteland. As council didn't go down to check what was happening until much later than the trees were cut down, for them to say there were no significant trees cut down is ridiculous. They would not know what was there. I remember large gum trees on that block, not just those within the 1030 ruling. They are now not there. The tree canopy that was central to the neighbourhood character has now been removed. How can this development then claim to comply with clause 22.12.6, nestling into the land, when they have cut every tree down? For the applicants to then state, this proposal is deemed appropriate with regards to conserving the environment values of the site, as no significant trees will be removed under this proposal, thus minimising the impact on the natural environment and Victoria's biodiversity, is insulting and game playing to the extreme. Clearly, this development is being sought by someone that loves to break rules and flaunt it. If you grant the submission, you're further encouraging them. This development clearly does not conform to the Shire's neighbourhood character policy, as all the trees and vegetation have been removed. The submission itself is confusing, full of inaccuracies, and by appearance purposely ambiguous. Why does it refer to lighting in Diamond Street, which is over 1 kilometre away? In regards to what is being built there, who can tell what is being proposed? The submission claims it will be built like the development next door. Are they referring to number 6 or number 10 Bird Street? 2 very different developments. How many allotments are also planned for this development? Are the proposed allotments lot 1 and 2, or are there further subdivisions of the land of lot 2 being planned? I'm also very concerned regarding the proposed easements on the side of the current house. The width of the easement is excessive for the current size of the proposed development. The trees near the fence of the neighbour's block will be severely impacted by trenching for sewage and drainage. This is an overdevelopment of a block that does not consider neighbourhood character. It will lead to excessive traffic and parking issues on a street that already has problems and is written in a way that leaves the gates open to build what he likes. The extra cars, parking and noise to this street doesn't fit within the council's own neighbourhood character policy. The cutting down of the trees and the extra houses that will ultimately be built will mean even more noise, lack of local wildlife and severe parking issues in an area that's already struggling. The lack of trees will also mean more dust, erosion and noise and lights coming up from Bolton Street.
Thank you, Carlotta. I'm sorry, I'll have to chop you off there. Would you like to go back to the one for ECO?
I don't mind, I'll do it later if you like.
Well, you're first off the list, so you might as well go on while you're there.
Sorry?
You might as well keep going.
Do I see a clock anywhere or not?
Yes, there's a clock
Oh,
on the
there,
screen.
right, I couldn't see it before, thanks. Eltham Community Action Group objects to yet another application from unscrupulous developers attempting to destroy Eltham's prize neighbourhood character for financial gain and greed, in this case in the semi-bush SLO2. This application is a clumsily put together compilation of documentation from 23 Diamond Street and 91 John Street. Similarities abound in more than just the reference to street lighting in Diamond Street. Statements in the application are so blatantly incorrect. For example, the 15-metre drop from front to rear of the property being described as gently sloping, that the applicant is merely thumbing his nose at council, residents and the environment and knowing he will probably get away with it. The removal of the building envelope suggested by council covering the entirety of lot 2 is a positive move. The necessity for a landscape plan to be submitted approved before the submission is certified sounds positive. However, in point 2, page 2, point 28, page 236, and unbelievable, the applicant suggested including 10 trees on the site. Council suggested deleting 3 because they're on the easement, fair enough, which lets 7. But council then said to leave these 7 trees on the site would leave it somewhat undevelopable given the space utilised to accommodate the trees. So we'll say just plant 3. The mind boggles. An unscrupulous developer indicates the planting of 10 and council says, no, you won't be able to develop sufficiently, only plant 3. Page 31.5, regarding the illegal planning infringement notice for the illegal removal of tree. The owner has volunteered to plant 3 trees to remediate the 1 tree that was removed. Was there any fine imposed as well? Will residents have access to the endorsed landscape plan? How will the points in condition 2 regarding the required landscape plan actually increase the ability of any development that occurs on the site to enhance the semi-bush SLO2 character? How detailed or scant a landscape plan would council accept for a subdivision that is obviously a development site? Point 31, page 246 says it all. The proposal will result in a suitable outcome for the area when considering the exiting neighbourhood character. Exiting or existing? Typo or Freudian slip? ECAG asks that if council genuinely desires to uphold the SLO and neighbourhood character of the area, that before approving the subdivision, if you do so, you firstly determine just how effective the suggested landscape plan would be in achieving this outcome. Thank you.
Well timed, Carlotta. Now I'd like to fellow councillors if they have any questions for you. Not one question for Carlotta? No? Looks like you're off the hook, Carlotta. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Councillor Clark.
Hang on.
I feel obliged, Carlotta, on our very last planning meeting to ask you, did you actually move or is this just your view again?
You are incorrigible, Peter.
Well, you know, I don't think you've met twice in 4 years, so I don't see why you should meet on this one. But anyway, have a good night.
Wish you well, Carlotta, and wave him goodbye.
Thanks very much,
Who
Carlotta.
are you going to do this to at Melbourne City Council, Peter?
I don't know. Generally, they have meetings there, unlike your group, but I guess it will be interesting to see whether you've met your preferred candidate this time. I suspect not.
All right, thanks, Carlotta. We'll move
He
on.
might try to be better than a one-term wonder, so he might treat
We'll move on to our next submitter, who is Marie Ward, and I think Marie is in the waiting room. Thanks, Carlotta. All the best.
Thank you.
Marie, can you turn your mic and your camera on, please? Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
So like everybody else, you have 3 minutes and then councillors may wish to ask you some questions. And can you see the time clock?
I
It has to
cannot.
start, but it will.
Okay.
Yeah, it's already.
Thank
Off
you.
go.
I would like to address some of the fundamental issues in the application. The application is in the name of a third party. There's not even involved in the development. In fact, according to ASIC, the business was deregistered. Of importance here is the actual declaration, which states that the information is true and correct and that the owner, that third party, has been notified of the permit application. I suggest to council that this declaration, which I assume has legal merit, otherwise it would not be requested, is of significant importance. The explanation that you've been given is that the change in ownership is of no consequence to the council's decision making. I believe that it is of consequence. The declaration is a formal, if not legal, part of the application process put in place by your council. The application has then been loaded up to the council website with what would appear to be a lack of due diligence and has gone out for public consultation. The council is part of the Crown, which works for on behalf of the state of Victoria. It's the community's expectation that such documentation is reviewed and is consistent and conforms with the standard that has been set by your own council, and to a greater extent, the quality of which is fitting for state government. On that basis alone, I suggest that it is of consequence and that it's not okay within government to be flippant about such areas. The proposal for Lot 1 references access via an existing driveway to an existing carport. There is no existing driveway to a carport, and access is via an illegally driving over a pedestrian footpath. I would suggest that this is a significant liability for the council that needs to be addressed immediately, and it's not okay. It's the matter of car parking. The council officers stated that by relocating the crossovers, there's enough space for one car park in the road reserve, and it's acceptable. However, what has not been brought to your attention is that the space between the proposed crossover is occupied by the only fire suppression system for the whole street. That's right. The car space that you've been asked to accept in the application is on top of the only fire hydrant. This now takes me to my final remarks. I want to raise the issue of the health and well-being of the community. By way of potential liability, shall the application be granted without so much as a review of the fire suppression system or a risk assessment? Given the bushfire season's upon us, it's incumbent upon the council to ensure that the community is adequately protected. We all recall the shortcomings of SP AusNet. It would be my recommendation that the council decline the application and investigate this matter further, more closely, prior to works commencing, so that the community and the council is not put at risk or liability. Finally, Councillor Ashton, when you came to council, you stated that you will try to seek out best practice. I believe now is the time to come good with your remarks. Councillor Clark, you stated that the community wants to make sure that the council gets the basics right. I believe this application should be declined on the basis of the profound risks that it imposes on the community. I feel that we have an opportunity, no, an obligation.
Thank you, Marie. Sorry, I have to stop you there. I'll now open it up to councillors if they have any questions for you. Councillor Demerit.
I'm just interested in what obligations you feel we do have. So could you just expand on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, I think just to actually basically go back over the application, there are a number of inconsistencies, and fundamentally some of those can lead to significant liabilities. For example, what we're suggesting in what has been put forward to yourselves is that you would approve a car parking space and some extra driveways that are put in. That car parking space is actually non-existent because there's actually a fire hydrant there. And in order for them to do these works, they'd have to disconnect that fire hydrant, which is the only mains that we actually have on the street. There's actually been no assessment. In fact, in my objection, I actually put forward that they speak to the MSF ESP. And in fact, you've actually not even done any consultation externally. It's actually in that documentation that you have in front of you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Marie from councillors? If not, thank you very much for your submission, Marie.
Thank you for listening to me today.
Our next submitter is Adrian Newman, and Adrian is here. If she could just unmute herself. Hi, Adrian. Just press that tick. We've got you now. So you have 3 minutes, and then councillors may wish to ask you some questions.
Can I see the clock?
Yes,
I can't see the clock on my iPad.
You got it?
iPad. No, I can't.
It'll start up here.
Righty up. I'll try and watch it from the computer. Can I restart the clock, please?
It's just started.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for letting us provide our objection to the 8 Bird Street Eltham subdivision. Anomalies in the documentation. We live directly across from 8 Bird Street and know the distances estimated are incorrect in both the Mosaic submission as well as council's report. 700 meters east of the site is an incorrect estimation of the distance to commercial facilities. Using Google Maps, it is 700 meters to CLC, 1.1 Ks to the train station, 1.2 Ks to the post office and Bank of Melbourne, 1.4 Ks to Coles. The correct facts should at least appear on the documentation. Page 11 of Mosaic submission states this proposed subdivision is identical in its intent to the neighboring block. Will this be like 6 Bird Street with a cottage and 1 house down the back, or 10 Bird Street with 1 house on the street and 4 units at the rear? Neighborhood character. Page 10 of Mosaic's submission states that the site is a garden with very limited existing native vegetation with no canopy trees. That was not the case until they cut down 8 existing trees, 2 of which were over 70 years of age and part of the canopy of the surrounding area. Evidently, if they tried to do this now, it would be illegal. This beggars belief. The voluntary planting of 3 tube stock trees as replacements will in no way add to the existing tree canopy anytime soon. Removing the large cypress and gum trees has increased weathering for us from the south and removed the screen to the strip mall on Bolton Street, now completely visible from our house. Mosaic cut down what constituted part of our neighborhood character, but then have the gall and standard C12 to say that the proposed subdivision will contribute to the existing neighborhood character of the area. Cutting down the trees and removing all subshrubs has removed a safe environment for birds, possums, butterflies, and bees, which are all pollinators, to live and breed. The species mix of birds has changed as well since the trees were removed. How will the neighborhood benefit from these actions? And parking. Yesterday, a young woman and an older man entered the house at 8 Bird Street where furniture and a doghouse has been dropped off, so it would appear that 8 Bird Street is up again for rental. Where did they park? Right over the fire department hydrant access to water for our street. Directly in the area, council's report identifies as our street's new car parking space. We have lived here 24 years, and more often than not, there have been parking issues with 8 Bird Street and the rest of the neighborhood due to parties, overnight stayers, and added vehicles. If Lot 2 gets developed into 4 units, parking will become even more problematic. As an aside, the crossover on the east side of Lot 1 leads up to an illegally erected carport. We asked the then tenant who put it up if he had a permit. He just smiled and said no. He was doing it as a favor for the owner. Thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Adrienne. Very well timed. Any questions for Adrienne from councillors? No, if not, thank you very much for your submission, Adrienne. Now I just want to clarify with Blaga, Austin, he's not speaking. Is his submission being read by the CEO or he's just not presenting? No?
Through the chair,
Right.
we've just been advised that he's no longer speaking and no further submission.
Right, well, our next submitter is Alan Murphy. Is he in the waiting room? Or David Adam? Oh, sorry, Alan Murphy's being read by our CEO, so I'm sorry about that. Over to you, Carl.
Thank you, Mayor. David Adam and I were surprised and disappointed to learn that we could not use Zoom share screen for photos and maps, so we have opted to have the CEO read out our submission. Our graphics have been emailed to the councillors, but sorry to the ratepayers at home. 1. Trends in the neighbourhood. Looking at the local map, I live at number 34 Warringah Crescent, moving counterclockwise. Number 38 was subdivided in 2014, number 47 in 2018.
I think we're on the wrong one, aren't we?
Yeah, we've decided this.
Yeah, I've been advised they're related.
Okay.
Oh.
Keep going.
Number 23 last month, and now we're asking number 26 in September. Planners and developers say we treat each case on its merits, but one thing we've learned from the COVID-19 pandemic is that you don't just look at each case, you must also look at trends. And here we see an accelerating trend to neighbourhood character. The planner's report says the proposed lot sizes are sufficient to retain the existing and preferred neighbourhood character. Well, the neighbours don't think so. There were 10 written objections. Also, 2 of the objections tonight are from neighbours who have been here over 50 years. You can't lecture them on neighbourhood character. Tree removal. The application is for 23 trees to be removed. This is after number 23, Warringah Crescent, applied to remove 41 trees. So in August and September, Council have approved the removal of up to 60 trees. Tell me that's not a trend, and tell me that's retaining neighbourhood character. Interruption to habitat link. Council's Environment Planning Officer has obviously looked at the site and recognises the habitat link from Maruka Park towards the Diamond Creek. She writes, this area has been significantly modified over the past few years and recent subdivision, reducing the overall value of the vegetation as habitat. Only one of the subdivisions from my map has begun clearing and building, so it's only going to get much worse. And now we're considering another subdivision. At ground level, the habitat link, some say wildlife corridor, passes through number 26 as per my rough drawing. However, looking at the proposed building envelopes, it can be seen the habitat link is disrupted, if not broken. I could say a lot more about this, but I think David Adam will cover it. Conclusion, it's not polite to say it, but once again, our neighbourhood is facing a dollar grab versus the local residents' preferences. From the viewpoint of neighbours, another 3-lot subdivision does not meet our preferred neighbourhood character. What's the value of an ESO and being in the Green Wedge Shire? Does council want us to subdivide and sell up? That's the end of that submission.
Next is David Adam.
I am the owner occupier of 30.
Again, we're on the last.
Yeah. Is it?
Yes.
These 2 don't feel like they're relevant to 8 Bird Street to me.
No, they should be on the last one.
Yeah.
Well, it's on my list and everybody else's, I think, so I'm not sure.
I think
my apologies. My apologies to the 2 submitters.
There is one from Virginia Jackson.
Correct.
And this definitely relates.
Correct.
Virginia is representing Harlock Jackson Proprietary Limited and asked that the plan be sent to the councillors. Virginia is a director and town planning consultant with Harlock Jackson Proprietary Limited and has been asked to prepare the submission on behalf of the permit applicant. I have assessed the proposal. I'm also familiar with the locality. I urge you to support the application. There is no credible basis for it to be refused. I make the following points in support of the application. Point 1, the site is 1,733 square meters. It is much larger than any other lot in the vicinity. On this ground alone, a 2-lot subdivision should be approved. Point 2, the existing dwelling is to be retained. This will ensure there is minimal disruption to the Bird Street streetscape. Point 3, in fact, the streetscape will be improved by the removal of the unsightly concreted apron that serviced the original milk bar, the air conditioning unit protruding from the front wall, and the steel structure in the front yard. Point 4, on planning grounds, the application has clear merit. It is a simple 2-lot subdivision of a large block of land in an established residential area. The proposed rear lot will be larger than other lots in Bird Street. Point 5, both adjoining lots, originally the same size as this site, already have multiple dwellings. There is no basis to preclude a second lot at the rear. The officer's recommendation would require lot 1 to be enlarged. The applicant is happy to support this change if the permit is approved. An amended plan has already been prepared to accommodate this change. This plan is attached for your consideration. If this application is approved, a landscape plan will be required that includes 2 trees capable of growing to 10 metres within the front setback. There are no trees there now. This is a significant improvement. 1 tree capable of growing to 6 metres in the rear of lot 1, and 3 trees capable of growing to 10 metres within lot 2. The permit would also contain strict planning requirements, including indigenous eucalypt species, building exclusion zones, tree protection fencing, no trees in the easement, appropriate irrigation systems, protection of trees on neighbouring lots, and planting to occur prior to the issue of statement of compliance. This is a significant net improvement that would not occur without the detailed requirements of a planning permit. The planning regime will be consistent with the preferred semi-bush neighbourhood character. Objectors are concerned about traffic and car parking. We note that your own traffic engineers support the application. They have no concerns about traffic or car parking. The proposal will result in more off-street car parking. In addition, and usually for an application like this, the proposal will result more on-street because of the removal of the large concrete apron in the front yard.
So that is the end of our list of submitters. Can I now hand it over to councillors? Do we have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Demerit.
I'd like to move an alternative recommendation.
And that is now up on the screen.
That the committee acting under delegation from council issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant the permit of land located at 8 Bird Street, Eltham, the subdivision of land into 2 lots on the following grounds. The proposed subdivision is not consistent with the purpose of Neighbourhood Residential Zone Schedule 1 or the Clause 65 decision guidelines, as a proposed subdivision layout density of lots is not consistent with the pattern of subdivision in the area. The proposal is contrary, number 2, the proposal is contrary to the objectives of Clause 22.12 Neighbourhood Character Policy. The proposed lot size are not in keeping with the preferred neighbourhood character of the area and the existing pattern of subdivision and development. Number 3, the proposal is not consistent with the subdivisional pattern of the locality as proposed in the subdivisional layout, and lot sizes is not reflective of the locality required under 65.2, and approval of the application to subdivide the land under the Nillumbik planning scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Demerit, do you have a seconder?
Thank you.
Councillor Clark, back to you, Councillor Demerit.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. There's a lot of issues with this application which we are not considering tonight. So the wholesale removal of trees off the site prior to putting the application in, it will be dealt with by council under other in other areas. The street parking, the issue to do with the fire hydrant. What we're looking at here is an inappropriate subdivision. And the applicant has acknowledged that themselves and has said that they would address that if we gave them, if we allowed this, granted this application. The applicant is sort of shown to, through their application, to perhaps not be that faithful to those sort of words. So I would ask that we don't grant this application on the grounds that it is inconsistent with the neighbourhood character of the area, that it will cause a large scar on the landscape when viewed from Bolton Street. It is a significant hill as you drive into Eltham, and if it becomes all housing with 2 trees on it, it will just look like a great big scar on the landscape in that area. It claims to be consistent with the building beside it. 300 square metres is a tiny little block in this area. And with no 173 agreement, the milk bar could be pulled down in any moment and a monstrosity put on that. And again, with no trees and a large easement down the side of that would cause unwanted visual bulk and just a big gaping hole beside it, which looks out into nothing. But again, we are really just looking at the subdivision, and the subdivision is inconsistent with the neighbourhood residential zone. It's inconsistent with clause 65. It is not. It is contrary to our neighbourhood character policy, clause 22.12, and it is not consistent with the locality subdivision layout as through clause 65.02. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Merrick. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, this has got the outstanding feature of the applicant, to be frank. And in my 4 years on the council, this is the worst applicant we have continually dealt with, and he deserves no support whatsoever. So I hope he's listening in, because had I been attending this council for the next 4 years, I would have voted against every other application that he brought before this council. There have been bad developers I've seen over 20 years in council, but this is the worst one by so far. It does not matter. He continues to act illegally, to flout the law, to ignore all of the planning schemes of the Shire and seek to work around the scheme at every opportunity. So I support Councillor Jumrick for those reasons. However, I would countenance the residents. This will not be easy to win at VCAT, because it is typical of the applicant, a shifty sort of outcome where you put a 2-lot subdivision up, make it sound simple, because you don't want to put in the full application, which would have been for 5 or 6 apartments, and do it properly. So to be frank, I don't hold much hope out at VCAT of being successful, because it is a very simple 2-lot application. The applicant has sought to utilise every opportunity with the 1030 rule, chop down anything in vicinity before they've made the application. We've tried to shut that door, particularly around the perimeter of fencings, and we've been successful now with support of government in that proposition. But that's not to say we've won on 1030. It's a bit better. It's got a long way to go. So, you know, to local members, you've got a long way to go here. You've only just skimmed the edges, and you're trying to fluff it through on the premise of you've dealt with 1030. No, you have not. And this is a perfect reason why you have not. So I say to the broader community of Eltham, you're going to have to band together hard to win this, and I don't hold out much hope. I understand why the officers have recommended as they have, and I've got no qualms with that. They've followed the planning scheme. But if you want significant change around this, it requires change to the planning scheme, effectively brought about by the determinations of the state government. There is going to be little over the journey that the Shire of Nillumbik can do to stop these sort of applications, or indeed to stop applicants who flout the rules on a consistent basis. That's no reason to stop trying, and that's what we'll do tonight, and why I support Councillor Jumrick. But don't think for a minute just because we're going to vote this one down, it's going to go away. Unfortunately, it will not. This council has had a very good track record on development over the last 4 years, and fought for every application that we think is appropriate to be able to be refused where appropriate and grant where it is not, and encourage good applications. I commend the council for its 4-year track record, as it does stand up to bad developers like tonight. I commend the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brooker.
Don't disappoint, Councillor Brooker.
Thank you, Mayor. No, this is the last hurrah. So I just want to say to the two people who put their application or submission to the earlier application, they did send it to councillors, or at least they did send it to me. So, you know, we decided in their favour. So I don't think they'd be too concerned. But, you know, we did take on board the arguments that they made. Look, I think with this one, I look at section 65, the decision guidelines. I think they're good because the planning scheme in those decision guidelines under section 65 and elsewhere seeks to provide for the fair and orderly use of land to conserve and enhance areas of value. How can one have a fair and orderly use of land when there has been the sort of activity that we have seen in this application? That is unfair and that is disorderly. So that's the reason why I'm voting the way I am. Thank you.
150 minutes to go, Councillor Booker. That was just for me because it's our last night, I'm sure. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of Councillor Demerrick's motion, please raise your hand. And that is a unanimous. Thank you, councillors. I'd just like to thank everybody in the gallery and everybody who made submissions tonight, and thank everybody who's watching from home. And I now declare the meeting closed at 8:03, not our shortest, but reasonably short, and wish everybody all the best for the future. Everybody stay safe and well out there in Nillumbik land, and hope that we all get to meet again one day out of lockdown. So stay safe. Thank you. Thank you.